Location: Cedar Rapids, Iowa. April 2019. Case status: solved. The Williamson family seemed like the perfect suburban household. Father Tom Williamson was a respected high school principal. Mother Linda worked as a nurse, and their 3 children, Michael, 17, Ashley, 15, and Danny, 12, were well-behaved students involved in various school activities. Their neighbors in the quiet Cedar Rapids subdivision often commented on what a close-knit, loving family the Williamsons appeared to be. They attended church together, hosted neighborhood barbecues, and Tom was known for coaching Little League baseball in his spare time. But behind the facade of normalcy, Tom Williamson was systematically torturing his own family through psychological manipulation, isolation, and physical abuse that he carefully concealed from the outside world. The truth began to emerge when Ashley Williamson collapsed at school and was taken to the hospital. Doctors discovered that she was severely malnourished and dehydrated, despite living in what appeared to be a financially stable household. When questioned about her condition, Ashley claimed she had been fasting for religious reasons. However, the school nurse noticed that Ashley seemed terrified when discussing her home life, and that she flinched whenever adults made sudden movements near her. The nurse contacted Child Protective Services, which launched an investigation into the Williamson household. What investigators discovered was a carefully orchestrated system of abuse that Tom had been implementing for nearly a decade. He had convinced his family that they were special and needed to follow strict rules to maintain their purity and spiritual strength. The children were forced to follow impossibly complex behavioral codes that Tom claimed were based on religious principles. Breaking any rule, which could include speaking without permission, making eye contact with strangers, or showing emotion, resulted in severe punishments that Tom called purification rituals. These punishments included being locked in the basement for days without food, forced to stand in uncomfortable positions for hours, or subjected to psychological torture where Tom would convince them that they were evil and deserved suffering. Linda Williamson had been brainwashed over years of abuse into believing that Tom's methods were necessary for their family's salvation. She participated in the abuse, believing she was helping her children become worthy of God's love. The most disturbing aspect was how Tom used his position as a school principal to maintain his facade of respectability while ensuring that no one would suspect what was happening at home. He was beloved by students and parents, frequently gave presentations on family values, and was active in community organizations. Tom had also isolated his family from extended relatives and outside friendships, convincing them that other people were corrupting influences who would try to turn them against each other. The children were homeschooled for most subjects and had minimal interaction with peers outside of mandatory school attendance. When police searched the Williamson home, they found detailed journals where Tom documented his abuse methods and his beliefs about purifying his family. He had been experimenting with different forms of psychological manipulation, keeping careful records of which techniques were most effective at maintaining control. The basement where the children were punished had been converted into what Tom called a reflection room, complete with restraints, cameras to monitor the children during their punishments, and religious imagery that Tom used to justify his actions. Michael and Danny Williamson had suffered years of abuse, but had never reported it because Tom had convinced them that they deserved punishment, and that speaking about family matters to outsiders was a sin that would result in even worse consequences. During the investigation, police discovered that Tom had been secretly recording his abuse sessions and had been sharing the footage with other individuals involved in similar family abuse situations. He was part of an underground network of parents who believed that extreme control and punishment were necessary for proper child rearing.
Tom was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse, false imprisonment, and distribution of child exploitation material. Linda was also charged as an accomplice, though her sentence was reduced due to evidence that she had also been a victim of long-term psychological abuse. The children were placed in protective custody and received extensive therapy to help them recover from years of systematic abuse. All three struggled with basic social skills and had difficulty trusting adults or understanding normal family dynamics. During his trial, Tom showed no remorse and continued to insist that his methods were necessary for raising morally pure children. He claimed that modern parenting was too permissive and that his children would thank him when they were older. Tom was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and Linda received 10 years, with the possibility of parole after serving half her sentence, contingent on participating in mental health treatment. The case shocked the Cedar Rapids community, where Tom had been widely respected and trusted with other people's children. Parents whose kids had been in Tom's school demanded investigations into whether he had abused students, though no evidence of school-based abuse was ever found. Ashley, Michael, and Danny were placed with different foster families to help them develop individual identities separate from the trauma they had shared. All three are now adults and have chosen to live private lives away from media attention.
His case led to increased training for educators on recognizing signs of family abuse and highlighted how respected community members can use their public personas to conceal private crimes. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you. Location: Tampa, Florida. Date: September 2020. Case status: solved. 42-year-old Kevin Morrison seemed like a model citizen in his Tampa neighborhood. He worked as an IT specialist for a local government office. Kevin had created an elaborate network of fake social media profiles targeting teenage girls across the southeastern United States. Unlike typical online predators who focus on individual victims, Kevin was simultaneously manipulating dozens of girls through carefully crafted personas designed to appeal to different personality types. His operation came to light when 16-year-old Brittany Walsh's parents became concerned about her secretive online behavior. Brittany had become withdrawn from family activities and spent most of her free time messaging someone she claimed was a fellow student from another school. When Brittany's mother, Patricia, checked her daughter's social media accounts, she discovered that Brittany was in an intense online relationship with someone called Tyler, who appeared to be an 18-year-old high school senior from a neighboring city. Patricia found Tyler's social media presence suspicious. His profiles contained hundreds of photos and seemed authentic, but something about his communication style felt off to her. When she tried to research Tyler's supposed high school, she discovered discrepancies in his story. Patricia hired a private investigator to look into Tyler's identity, and the investigation revealed that Tyler didn't exist. The photos were stolen from multiple social media accounts of real teenagers, and the personal information Tyler had shared with Brittany was entirely fabricated. When confronted with this evidence, Brittany initially refused to believe that Tyler was fake. She insisted that their relationship was real and that her mother was trying to sabotage her happiness. This reaction prompted Patricia to seek help from law enforcement. FBI cybercrime specialists traced Tyler's accounts back to Kevin Morrison and discovered that he was operating over 200 fake profiles across various platforms.
Each profile was meticulously crafted with stolen photos, fabricated backgrounds, and personality traits designed to attract specific types of teenage victims. Kevin had been using advanced psychological profiling techniques to identify vulnerable girls, those dealing with family problems, low self-esteem, or social isolation. He would then create personas that perfectly matched what each girl was looking for in a romantic partner. The scope of Kevin's operation was staggering. He had active conversations with over 150 teenage girls at the time of his arrest, maintaining detailed spreadsheets to keep track of each fake identity and the personal information he had gathered about each victim. Most disturbing was Kevin's long-term strategy. Instead of immediately pushing for in-person meetings, he would spend months building emotional dependency, gradually isolating his victims from their real-world relationships and convincing them to keep their online relationship secret. Once he had established sufficient control, he would begin requesting explicit photos and videos, which he would then use to blackmail his victims into continued compliance. He had collected thousands of images and videos from his victims over a 5-year period. Kevin's computer systems revealed that he was part of a larger network of online predators who shared tactics, traded victim information, and even collaborated on complex manipulation schemes. The network had developed sophisticated methods for avoiding detection and for maintaining psychological control over their victims. When FBI agents searched Kevin's home, they found a soundproofed room in his basement that had been prepared for holding captives. Kevin had been planning to transition from online manipulation to physical abduction, starting with victims who lived within driving distance of Tampa. His journal contained detailed plans for kidnapping several girls, including specific dates, locations, and methods. He had been conducting surveillance on some of his victims, learning their daily routines and identifying opportunities for abduction. During interrogation, Kevin showed no empathy for his victims and instead expressed frustration that his work had been interrupted. He described his manipulation of teenage girls as a form of social engineering and claimed he was providing them with attention and validation they weren't receiving elsewhere. The investigation revealed that Kevin had successfully abducted and murdered 3 teenage girls over the past 2 years. Their disappearances had been investigated as runaways because Kevin had manipulated them into believing they were leaving home voluntarily to meet their online boyfriends. Kevin was charged with multiple counts of child exploitation, kidnapping, murder, and operating a criminal enterprise. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including detailed digital records of his communications with hundreds of victims. During his trial, several of Kevin's surviving victims testified about the psychological impact of his manipulation. Many described themselves as feeling completely dependent on their fake online relationships and being devastated when they learned the truth about Kevin's deception. "He made me feel like I was the most important person in the world," testified one victim. "He remembered every detail about my life, supported me through family problems, and made me feel understood in a way nobody else did. Learning that it was all fake and that he was planning to hurt me destroyed my ability to trust anyone." Kevin was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The judge called his crimes a systematic campaign of psychological terrorism against vulnerable children.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you. Location: Springfield, Missouri. Date: July 2019. Case status: solved. Harold Thompson was the self-appointed leader of his neighborhood watch group, a position he took very seriously. The 68-year-old retired postal worker spent his days patrolling the quiet suburban streets of Springfield, keeping detailed logs of suspicious activities and regularly contacting police about potential crimes. Harold's neighbors initially appreciated his dedication to community safety. Crime rates in their area were low, and Harold seemed to have an uncanny ability to spot potential problems before they escalated. He was credited with preventing several break-ins and was frequently praised at community meetings for his vigilance. But Harold's definition of suspicious activity gradually became more broad and disturbing. He began reporting normal activities as potential crimes: children playing too loudly, teenagers walking through the neighborhood, delivery drivers who took too long at certain houses. The situation escalated when Harold started confronting people directly rather than just reporting them to authorities. He would approach joggers, dog walkers, and visitors to demand identification and explanations for their presence in his neighborhood. Several residents complained to police about Harold's increasingly aggressive behavior, but he was careful to stay within legal boundaries during these encounters. He never physically threatened anyone and always claimed he was simply exercising his rights as a concerned citizen. The truth about Harold's activities came to light when a jogger named Patricia Williams went missing during her regular evening run through the neighborhood. Patricia was a 34-year-old teacher who lived several blocks away, but frequently ran through Harold's area because she enjoyed the tree-lined streets and well-maintained sidewalks. Patricia's disappearance triggered a massive search effort involving police, volunteers, and search and rescue teams. Harold was among the most active volunteers, organizing search parties and providing detailed information about Patricia's usual running routes. During the investigation, several witnesses mentioned seeing Harold approach Patricia on the evening she disappeared. When questioned, Harold claimed he had simply warned her about suspicious individuals he had seen in the area and suggested she find a safer route for her evening runs. But Harold's story began to unravel when police discovered inconsistencies in his timeline and found evidence that he had been following Patricia for several weeks before her disappearance. His neighborhood watch logs contained unusually detailed entries about Patricia's running schedule, clothing choices, and route variations. A search warrant for Harold's property revealed a horrifying scene in his basement. Police found Patricia's body, along with evidence that she had been held captive for several days before being killed. Harold had converted his basement into a makeshift prison, complete with restraints, surveillance equipment, and soundproofing. The investigation revealed that Patricia was not Harold's first victim. Over the past 3 years, 5 people who had been reported as suspicious in Harold's neighborhood watch reports had later disappeared under mysterious circumstances. All of the victims had been individuals Harold had confronted during his patrol activities. Harold's basement contained personal belongings from all of his victims, along with detailed journals documenting his surveillance activities and his decision-making process for selecting targets. He had been using his position as neighborhood watch leader to identify potential victims and to establish alibis for his crimes. Most disturbing was Harold's motivation for the murders. His journals revealed that he genuinely believed he was protecting his neighborhood by eliminating people he deemed threatening or undesirable. In his twisted logic, killing suspicious individuals was the ultimate form of crime prevention. Every neighborhood has undesirable elements that threaten the safety and property values of law-abiding citizens, one journal entry read. The police are too restricted by rules and procedures to deal with these threats effectively. Someone has to take decisive action to protect our community. Harold had developed elaborate criteria for determining who posed a threat to his neighborhood.
His targets included people of certain ethnic backgrounds, individuals he perceived as economically disadvantaged, and anyone whose behavior didn't conform to his rigid standards of suburban normalcy. The investigation also revealed that Harold had been manipulating crime statistics to support his narrative about neighborhood threats. He had been filing false police reports about crimes that never occurred, and had been exaggerating or fabricating details about actual incidents to make his area seem more dangerous than it actually was. This strategy served two purposes. It justified his extreme vigilance to neighbors and authorities, and it created a climate of fear that made residents more supportive of his aggressive patrol methods. Harold had essentially manufactured a crime problem in order to position himself as the solution. When police searched Harold's computer, they found extensive research on serial killers, home security systems, and surveillance techniques. He had been studying criminal psychology and law enforcement methods to improve his ability to select victims and avoid detection. He had also been documenting his crimes in disturbing detail, taking photographs and videos of his victims and keeping detailed records of their final moments. He appeared to view his murders as a form of community service and took pride in what he perceived as his effectiveness in eliminating threats. During his interrogation, Harold continued to insist that his actions were justified and necessary. He expressed no remorse for his victims and instead complained that the investigation was disrupting his important work of protecting the neighborhood. "I was keeping everyone safe," Harold told detectives. "Crime rates were down, property values were up, and families could let their children play outside without fear. Now that I'm gone, this neighborhood will become overrun with criminals and undesirables." Harold was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and filing false police reports. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including physical evidence from his basement, documented surveillance of his victims, and detailed confessions in his personal journals. The trial revealed the full scope of Harold's crimes and the sophisticated methods he had used to select and capture his victims. Several surviving residents testified about Harold's increasingly aggressive behavior and their growing uncomfortableness with his patrol activities. Harold was sentenced to death, though he continues to appeal his conviction while maintaining his innocence and insisting that he was protecting his community from dangerous individuals. The case shocked the Springfield community, where Harold had been viewed as a dedicated volunteer and concerned citizen. Many neighbors struggled with the realization that someone they had trusted and admired was actually a serial killer who had been targeting people in their own community. The Springfield Police Department implemented new oversight procedures for neighborhood watch groups and established guidelines for reporting suspicious behavior to prevent similar situations in the future. The case also led to increased awareness about the potential for vigilante violence and the importance of proper training for community safety volunteers. Patricia Williams' family established a foundation in her memory that promotes community safety through professional law enforcement rather than amateur vigilante activities. They advocate for better screening and oversight of community volunteers who work in public safety roles.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you. Location: Austin, Texas. Date: March 2022. Case status: solved. 28-year-old Rebecca Foster appeared to be living the perfect life on social media. Her Instagram account showcased her beautiful apartment, successful career as a marketing consultant, loving relationship with her boyfriend Derek, and active social life filled with attractive friends and exciting events.
What her thousands of followers didn't know was that Rebecca's entire online persona was built on lies, manipulation, and increasingly dangerous schemes to maintain her fabricated lifestyle. Rebecca's deception began small, using filters and strategic photography to enhance her appearance, exaggerating her job responsibilities and salary, and staging photos to make her life seem more glamorous than it actually was. But as her online following grew and the pressure to maintain her image intensified, Rebecca's lies became more elaborate and destructive. The truth about Rebecca's activities began to emerge when several of her real-life acquaintances started noticing discrepancies between her online posts and reality. Friends who knew Rebecca personally observed that she was posting photos from expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, and high-end shopping trips that didn't align with her actual financial situation. When questioned about these inconsistencies, Rebecca would become defensive and claim that she had sponsorship deals and income streams that she preferred to keep private. She gradually began distancing herself from people who knew her real circumstances and focused on maintaining relationships primarily through social media. Rebecca's schemes escalated when she began using her online influence to manipulate others into funding her fabricated lifestyle. She started a series of crowdfunding campaigns for fake emergencies, claiming she needed money for medical treatments, family crises, and business investments that didn't actually exist. Her followers, who believed they knew Rebecca through her carefully curated online presence, donated thousands of dollars to help her through these manufactured crises. Rebecca used this money to fund the expensive lifestyle she portrayed online, creating a cycle where she needed increasingly dramatic fake emergencies to maintain her image. But Rebecca's most disturbing scheme involved exploiting her relationship with Derek Mitchell, who was genuinely in love with her and unaware of the extent of her deception. Rebecca had been secretly recording their intimate moments and private conversations, which she then used to blackmail Derek into participating in her fraudulent activities. Rebecca convinced Derek that they were both in legal trouble due to her financial schemes and that he needed to help her obtain money to pay off creditors and avoid prosecution. She manipulated him into believing that their relationship and his reputation depended on his cooperation with increasingly illegal activities. Under Rebecca's manipulation, Derek began stealing money from his employer, taking out loans in other people's names, and even participating in identity theft schemes. Rebecca convinced him that these activities were temporary measures to solve their problems and that they would be able to pay everything back once her legitimate business deals came through. The scheme began to unravel when one of Derek's co-workers noticed unusual activity in company accounts and reported it to management. The investigation revealed that Derek had stolen over $50,000 from his employer over a 6-month period. When confronted by his employer and police, Derek initially refused to explain his actions because Rebecca had convinced him that admitting to the theft would implicate her in even worse crimes. However, as the investigation progressed and Derek faced serious criminal charges, he began to reveal the truth about Rebecca's manipulation. Police investigation of Rebecca's activities revealed a much larger pattern of fraud and manipulation than anyone had suspected. She had been running multiple online personas simultaneously, each with different backstories and follower bases, and had been using these accounts to promote various scams and fraudulent schemes. She had created fake testimonials for products and services, had been selling non-existent merchandise through her social media accounts, and had been using her influence to promote investment opportunities that were actually elaborate Ponzi schemes targeting her young, financially inexperienced followers.
Most disturbing was Rebecca's complete lack of empathy for her victims. Her personal journals and computer files revealed that she viewed her followers as resources to be exploited rather than real people with genuine trust in her. She had detailed psychological profiles of her most generous donors and had been specifically crafting content to trigger emotional responses that would lead to larger donations. "These people choose to believe in the fantasy I create," Rebecca wrote in one journal entry. "If they're stupid enough to send money to someone they only know through Instagram, they deserve to be scammed. I'm just giving them what they want, a chance to feel like they're part of something special and important." Rebecca had also been manipulating Derek far more extensively than initially revealed. She had been recording their intimate moments not just for blackmail, but to create content for subscription-based adult websites where she was selling access to private videos without Derek's knowledge or consent. The investigation revealed that Rebecca had victimized dozens of people through various schemes, stealing over $200,000 through crowdfunding fraud alone. Her victims included college students who donated their savings, elderly followers who believed they were helping a young woman in crisis, and small business owners who had invested in her fake entrepreneurial ventures. When arrested, Rebecca showed no remorse for her actions and instead expressed anger that her victims had ruined her carefully constructed online persona by reporting her crimes. She continued to maintain that she had been providing entertainment and inspiration to her followers, and that any money they gave her was voluntary. During her trial, several victims testified about the emotional and financial impact of Rebecca's deceptions. Many described feeling foolish for trusting someone they only knew through social media, but also emphasized that Rebecca had deliberately exploited their genuine desire to help someone in need. "She didn't just steal money from us," one victim testified. "She stole our faith in other people's stories and our willingness to help others online. Her lies made it harder for people with real emergencies to get help because she taught us to be suspicious of everyone." Derek Mitchell received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation and testimony against Rebecca. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service and was required to pay restitution to his former employer. Rebecca was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge noted that her crimes were particularly harmful because they exploited social media platforms and damaged public trust in online fundraising for legitimate causes. The case led to increased scrutiny of social media influencers and crowdfunding campaigns, with platforms implementing stronger verification requirements and more robust fraud detection systems. It also sparked broader conversations about the psychological impact of social media culture and the pressure to present perfect online personas. Derek Mitchell has become an advocate for recognizing manipulation in relationships and speaks publicly about how psychological abuse can lead victims to participate in criminal activities. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining perspective on online relationships and seeking help when partners pressure others into illegal activities. Rebecca's victims formed a support group to help each other recover financially and emotionally from her crimes. Many have become advocates for fraud prevention education and work to help others recognize the warning signs of social media scams.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you. Location: Portland, Oregon, November 2018. Case status: solved. 23-year-old Jessica Palmer was desperate to find a roommate to help with rent on her downtown apartment. When Maria Santos responded to her Craigslist ad, Jessica thought she had found the perfect match. Maria was clean, quiet, and paid her share of expenses on time. For the first 2 months, everything seemed normal. Maria kept to herself, worked night shifts at a local hospital, and rarely brought guests over. Jessica appreciated having such a low-maintenance roommate and even considered them friends when Maria would occasionally cook dinner for both of them. But strange things started happening around the 3rd month. Jessica would come home to find her personal belongings had been moved or were missing entirely. At first, it was small items like jewelry or makeup, which Jessica assumed she had simply misplaced. Then, larger items began disappearing. Clothes, books, even her laptop charger. When Jessica confronted Maria about the missing items, Maria would act genuinely confused and offer to help look for them. Sometimes the items would mysteriously reappear in Jessica's room, leading Jessica to question her own memory and mental state. The situation escalated when Jessica started feeling sick after eating meals that Maria prepared. She experienced severe stomach cramps, dizziness, and episodes of confusion that would last for hours. Jessica attributed these symptoms to stress from her demanding job, but the episodes only occurred after eating Maria's cooking. One evening, Jessica pretended to leave for work, but instead hid in her car outside the apartment building. Through the window, she watched Maria go through her personal belongings, try on her clothes, and spend time sitting at Jessica's desk, apparently pretending to be her. Jessica decided to install a hidden camera in the common areas of their apartment. What the camera recorded over the next week was beyond anything she could have imagined. The footage showed Maria engaging in increasingly disturbing behavior when Jessica wasn't home. She would go through Jessica's mail, copy her handwriting, and even practice mimicking Jessica's mannerisms in front of the mirror. Most shocking of all, Maria was systematically poisoning Jessica's food with small amounts of prescription medications. But the most disturbing discovery came when Jessica found Maria's journal hidden in her bedroom. The entries revealed that Maria had been obsessed with Jessica from before they became roommates. She had been following Jessica for weeks before responding to the roommate ad, learning her routines and preferences. "Jessica has the perfect life that should have been mine," one entry read. "She's pretty, successful, and everyone likes her. But I can be her better than she can. I'm studying everything about her so I can take over her identity completely." The journal detailed Maria's plan to slowly poison Jessica until she became too sick to work or maintain her social relationships. Once Jessica was completely dependent on her care, Maria planned to assume her identity gradually, telling people that Jessica had moved away and that she was Jessica's cousin who had taken over the apartment. Maria had already begun executing parts of this plan. She had obtained copies of Jessica's driver's license and credit cards, and had been using Jessica's identity to apply for jobs and even date men online. Several of Jessica's friends had received strange messages from someone claiming to be Jessica, but with subtle differences in writing style and personality. When police arrested Maria and searched her belongings, they found multiple fake IDs with Jessica's information but Maria's photo. They also discovered that Maria Santos wasn't her real name. She was actually Carmen Rodriguez, who had a history of identity theft and had pulled similar schemes on at least 4 other young women over the past 6 years. 2 of Carmen's previous victims had died under suspicious circumstances, both from what appeared to be accidental drug overdoses. Police reopened these cases as potential homicides after discovering Carmen's pattern of gradual poisoning. During her interrogation, Carmen showed no remorse and continued to insist that she could be Jessica better than Jessica could. She claimed that Jessica was wasting her life and that Carmen would have made better use of her advantages. Carmen was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, identity theft, and fraud. The judge called her crimes a calculated attempt to steal not just someone's possessions, but their entire existence. Jessica survived, but suffered permanent health problems from months of systematic poisoning. She moved back in with her parents and underwent extensive therapy to deal with the psychological trauma of learning that someone had been planning to completely erase her identity. The worst part wasn't the poisoning or the theft. It was realizing that someone had studied me so intensely that they believed they could become me. It makes you question everything about your own identity and wonder who you really are if someone else can just decide to take over your life. The case highlighted the vulnerabilities of roommate arrangements found through online platforms and led to increased awareness about identity theft tactics. Jessica now advocates for better background check requirements for roommate matching services.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.